All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're continuing our talk on how to simplify a fraction. And one thing we don't like is having a radical in the denominator. So there's two ways we could get rid of it. We've seen that you could move a term or a denominator into the numerator by putting a negative exponent on it. We'll get to that at a different time. Right now, we're going to do what's called rationalizing the denominator. What that means is we're taking the idea of anything times itself. So let's say 6 times 6 is equal to 1. So this is just a refresher that this is true. 6 divided by 6 is equal to 1. And anything times 1 is itself. We're going to use these two facts to rationalize the denominator. So we're given radical 5 over radical 3n. Could say square root as well. I'm mixing up the language so you can get practice hearing it in any direction. But we don't like this radical or the square root being in the denominator. So we want to use this fact first to get rid of the square root. In other words, if I take this whole thing and I multiply it by square root of 3n over square root of 3n, that's the same thing as multiplying the whole thing times 1, and anything times 1 is itself. So in reality, I'm not going to be changing its value at all. But when I do this, to multiply fractions, I just multiply straight across. I'm going to get the square root of 3n times the square root of 3n. And that's going to be under the square root of 5 times the square root of 3n. Now, the fun thing is, when you have a square root and there's multiplication, just as we've been able to take things out as a coefficient, if things are multiplying and they're all under the same root, we can actually combine them under one sign. What I mean by that is, I can take this square root of 5 and the square root of 3n and just say the square root of 5 times 3n. All under the same square root or radical sign. Now down here, anything times itself is squared. It's the definition. So again, the refresher is anything times itself is itself squared. So there's 3 facts we've used so far. And we can simplify even further because under this radical, 5 times 3 is 15. Times n, all divided by, well, squares and roots are opposite operations, so they cancel each other, and it leaves us with 3n. And this would be our final answer, because there's no longer a radical in the denominator, but there's no numbers that we can cancel, because we can only cancel numbers that are coefficients or outside of a radical. And that's another reason we want to learn how to simplify radicals, is so we can learn how to simplify them with what's inside versus what's outside of those radical signs.